Welcome to Wave Wasters, I'm Matt, and today I'm going to show you how I make the molds for casting fin tabs on my homemade fins. These are my two fin tab molds, and I've been using this style of mold probably for 6 or 7 years, and it works quite well. What I've done is I have a base for holding the silicone inserts, and then I have an adjustable arm that I can use to set the cant. You don't have to make a base like this. What you can do is you can use just a piece of MDF and router the length of the insert you need for your fin tab, and then you can just fill it with silicone. And then instead of adjusting the cant with the arm, you can just use a little bit of tape to adjust the cant. This is how I did my first few sets of fins, and it works good. It's just a little trickier to get the pair of fins the exact same. For building these molds, I'm not going to go into the exact dimensions of the base and how I did it, but I'll just go over a rough explanation of it. Because I've just used scrap to make these, there's no really right or wrong way to do it. The main thing you want is to have the arm of the mold to be able to rotate from the same line as the two inserts of the fin. That way when you adjust it, you're setting the cant the same on both fins. And to do that, what I've done is just drawn a line down the whole base of the mold, and that just makes sure the two inserts are perfectly in line with each other and with the arm. The other thing I've done is I've cut two channels on that line, and I've cut them about 1/4 inch bigger all the way around the fin, and that's going to allow for the silicone to go in around the fin tab that we're going to cast. You also want to make sure the base is just a little bit thicker than the depth of your fin tab. So that way you get a little bit of silicone on the bottom of the mold. If it's not deeper, you can always build up some silicone around the top of the fin tab, and that'll work as well. But it's just a little easier if it's just deeper, and then you have a nice flat spot for the resin to pool. And then I have these two legs just to help hold the base off the ground a little bit. And it also gave me a point to attach these arms to. And what I did, I used a T-nut on this side of the board, and then I bolted through the arm into the T-nut, and I did that on both sides. And what that allows you to do is when you tighten it, you can adjust the arm to the amount of cant you want in the fins, and the arm won't move. It also makes sure that both fins have the same amount of cant. To make the silicone insert for the mold, you're going to need a fin that you can cast the tab from. You're going to need silicone. You can use a silicone design for making molds, but I found that using hardware store 100% silicone from the kitchen and bath section works well. You're also going to need cornstarch to mix with the hardware store silicone and a little bit of acrylic paint. To prep the fin tab for casting the mold, you're going to want to fill in any of the little grooves and holes in the tab. I like to use hot glue, and then I trim it flush to the rest of the fin tab. And this will just give a little bit more room in your mold. Once you have the notches in the fin filled in, you want to find a way to suspend the fins above the mold so that the tabs of the fin are perfectly vertical and perpendicular to the mold. I like to use the adjustable arm of the mold, and what I do is I just unscrew it so then it just has a friction fit to the mold. And then I will mark the angle the arm needs to be so that the fin tabs are perfectly vertical. You also want to make sure that your two fins are facing each other so that the front of the tabs are facing to the center of the mold. This way you will put the cant on the correct side of each fin when you cast the fin tabs. After that, you want to take your silicone and you want to put it into a small container. And the next thing you want to do is mix in your cornstarch, and I like to use enough cornstarch so that the silicone almost becomes like a cake frosting, buttercream kind of consistency. The exact ratio doesn't really matter. It's just going to speed up the time the silicone cures, and it'll also cure it all the way through instead of just on the outside. I also like to add a little bit of acrylic paint to the mixture, and this just allows me to know that I have it thoroughly mixed. Once you have the cake frosting consistency, you're going to want to fill the channels of the mold all the way up. This is going to be a little more silicone than we need, but that's okay. It'll allow us to push it down so that there are no air bubbles around the tabs of the fin. I didn't have quite enough mixed, so I just mixed some more really quick. And as long as the consistencies are relatively the same, it'll all cure in one solid block. Now that I have my channels filled, I'm going to grab the arm with the fins taped to it, and I'm going to set those into the mold, and I'm going to keep it on the lines that I already have pre-marked. And that's going to allow the fin tabs to be vertical. And then I'm just going to squish the silicone all the way around just to make sure that I have no air bubbles in around the fin tabs. If there are some bubbles, that's okay. It's just going to leave a little bit of a bump of resin, which can be cleaned up after the resin is cured. Now that I've pushed down the silicone all around the fin tabs, I'm going to let this cure overnight. Now that I've left this overnight to cure, I'm going to remove the fins, and I'm just going to gently wiggle them a little bit and then slowly peel the silicone around the tab a little. And this will allow the fin to just pop right out. And you're going to want to remove the fin in the same way you would remove it out of a fin box. So where these are future fins, I'm going to pull it so that the front of the fin lifts out before the back. After you have your fins removed, you want to trim any of the excess silicone around the top of the mold. And finally, you want to reattach the arm to the mold. Okay, now that we have the mold created, I'm going to show you how I use the mold. I don't actually have any fins ready to cast tabs onto, so I'm just going to use some footage from one of my other fin videos and just talk about what I do to cast fin tabs. The first thing you want to make sure is that when you've glassed your fins, the tab of the fin is thinner than the inside of the mold. And you want to make sure that you have the fiberglass fibers going down into the tab, because that's where the strength is going to come from. Before I mix my resin to fill the molds, I like to chop up a little bit of my extra fiberglass and put it in a container, and I'll set that aside till I need it. The next thing I'm going to do is mix my resin. I like to use epoxy, but this method should also work with other resins. You're just going to want to make sure that it won't stick to the silicone. Now that I have my resin mixed, I'm going to fill the molds about halfway to 3/4 of the way full. And then I'll take one of my stir sticks and just move the resin a little bit inside the mold to get any little air bubbles that are stuck to the side of the mold out. Once I have that done, I'll take my leftover resin and I'll mix it with those chopped up fibers that I cut up earlier. I like to jam this mixture of fiberglass fibers and resin into the ends of the tab, and this is going to give it a little bit more strength than straight resin, and it just gives where the fin hooks into the box and where the set screws screw into just a little bit more strength. You can do it with straight resin, but it just won't be quite as durable as a little bit of chopped fiber with resin. After I have that in, I'm going to put my fin into the mold. I like to put my fins into the mold by tilting it the same way you would put into the box, and this just makes sure that you keep those fibers in the back squished into the very back. Once you have your fins into the mold, you're going to want to make sure you have both facing each other, and then you're going to want to set the cant on the arm of the mold. Once you have that set, you're good to go and let the resin cure. Once the resin's cured, you're going to want to remove the fin, and I like to wiggle the fin side to side and then remove it the same way you would remove it from a fin box. Once you have the fins out, you're going to want to clean up any of the resin around the tab, and you'll probably have to thin down the tabs ever so slightly to get them to fit in the fin box. Alright, that's how I've been making my fin tabs. I hope this answers any questions you might have about the process. And if there's something I missed, drop me a comment and I'll try to reply to it with the answer. This is a process that just takes a lot of trial and error. to find what works for you. This has worked well for me, but I am looking at other ways to make them better so there's a little bit less finishing time to them. But with that being said, if you go out and make this mold, let me know how it turns out, and happy fin making.